us, Rabbi Dr. Raphael Zarum, well known to all of us, on the subject tonight of Maoz, Tzur, and the politics of assimilation.
Welcome, everybody. It's Hanukkah just around the corner, Thursday night, and we're going to be inside our houses singing. And you know, COVID is continued, but there is light at the end of the tunnel, please God. And as a result, we can look forward in a positive way. But I want to get into Maoz Tzur with you because it's a very famous song, and we all love to sing it. But what's it about, right? It's a well-known sing-along. But what are we singing? You know, is it really about Hanukkah? What do we mean? We know the tune, and I don't want to ruin it for you, but I do want to get into what it's really about, and it might surprise you. So I'll spend about hopefully 30, 40 minutes going through it, and then I'll take your questions as well. So you know, if I was doing this live with you, I'd get the entire room to do a rendition of each verse. But it doesn't work so well on Zoom because of a time delay and volumes and shame. So it might just be me, right? But you know, Maoz Tzur Yeshuati Lachane Ele Shabeach. My refuge, my rock of salvation. It's pleasant to sing your praises. Tikon Beit Tefillati v'sham todana zabeach. Restore your house of prayer and offer thanks, right? And look at this. And this is my translation. I've tried to translate it as accurately as possible. You know, I mean, when was this written? Is it even about Hanukkah? Le'etachin madbeach mitzaham nabeach. When you've restored the barking foe. Right, hamnabeach, like barking. When we'll celebrate the song, Azegmor B'Shim is more Chanukat Hamizbeach, the altar's dedication. So it's got the word Chanukat, which sounds like Hanukkah. So that might be a connection, but it's really about the altar's dedication. In the Seder Balotcha, we talk about Chanukat Hamizbeach, the dedication of the tabernacle in the wilderness, and then the altar of the temple. It's not specifically about Hanukkah. So the first thing to appreciate is this is a poem. It's poetry. And it's in Hebrew. So to appreciate it, we have to think like poets. We have to do a literary analysis of the text to try and see what the poet was teaching us. I mean, famously, it's got his name down the side. You can see Mem Reish Daled Kaf Yud Mordechai. And then often that's a traditional thing poets would do, is put their name in the first letter of each verse. But that's not telling us what's going on. So the question you have to ask is, what's going on in this verse? What's it trying to say? So it doesn't talk about God directly. It talks about God, my salvation. My question is, who is my? Who is me? Is me the Jewish people? Is me the Jewish people of all time? Or one person, one Jew, the poet? It's not clear. We'll get to that. And he says, it's pleasant to sing to you. And it says, restore your house of prayer. So this was clearly written at a time when there was no temple. But how far after? The story of the Maccabees is 165 BCE. How much later is this writing? It's clearly in some time in exile. Restore your house of prayer. And there will offer thanks. But then it says, and when you slaughtered the barking foe. Now, what's interesting here, and you'll get it in every verse, is a contrast between us and them, between what they do and what we do. And each verse does it with a different form of imagery. So as you can see, the imagery here is of sound. Right? What we do is we offer thanks with prayer. So we sing, Na'ele Shabeach, we sing praises. That's beautiful music coming together. Whereas what does our enemy do? They bark, they do noise. So obviously we're talking about the difference between violence and about spirituality, but the way it does it in this verse is through sound. Can you see that? So it's, you know, Beit Tefillati, a house of prayer, versus barking. So it's us and them in terms of sound. We sing praises to God, and they do white noise. They do barking and noise to get in the way. But we hope one day to celebrate and rededicate the altar. So that's first verse. The second verse, and you've got a clue here because I've summarized it, but it's clearly about slavery in Egypt. I won't always listen to the chat, but if it's going on the next step, I will. Okay. Oh, someone's got a power cut. Okay. I wish you well. My soul was sated with misery. My strength was spent. Right, when my life was kasher, my life was made bitter with hardship. B'shibud malchut egla, b'shibud, which is the enslavement of the kingdom of the calf. Now you're saying, why did it just say Egypt? So remember, this is poetry. So just like the kingdom of the calf might sound weird to you, but it's wonderful to talk in this image way, because scholars would know that one of the main gods was worshipped and respected in Egypt was the calf, and so it's called the kingdom of the calf. But God with a mighty hand brought out his treasured people. Sugula is treasured. We are Sugula. While Pharaoh, Chel Paro, Chel is Chayal, soldiers, right? Chel Paro, The soldiers of Pharaoh, his host, his army, and all his followers, they fell like a stone. So maybe we can try a bit of interaction. Do you want to write in the chat? Again, remember, look at the thing. What do we do and what do they do? And what's the parallel imagery here? Anybody want to have a go? Right in the chat. What do we do and what do they do? And the way the poet is analyzing this. Because to appreciate poetry, and actually much of Tanakh, you have to have a poet's ear, as well as a good scholarly academic approach to read and understand the commentaries. You have to feel the Hebrew or feel the ideas. So I'm talking to give you time. But in the chat, everyone want to have a go and write down, what do they do? Even if you just repeat the phrase, what do they do and what do we do? Okay, look at the lot, it's got it over here. What are we and what are they? And what's the imagery here? Can anybody work it out? I've learned when you ask a question on Zoom for the gap, you take a drink at that point, and that kind of gives something to do. Okay, we've got a couple of answers in the chat over here. So we raise up, they sink down. Excellent, Karen. Excellent. You've got it exactly right. Can you see? We are brought out, like hot sea, brought up, still got treasured, and they fall like a stone. Do you know what the image I think of with this? Panning for gold. You know, those gold prospectors going out west, you know, and they would hope there was gold in the streams, and they would take that pan and it would have stones in it, and they would shake it, and the stones would fall down, but the gold, the treasure, the skula, would remain. And I love that image of God and the sea is like panning, right? So the Jews get saved, comes to the top, and the Egyptians fall below. That's the image that it's using over here, right? Of us and them. Pharaoh's hosts sink and we get brought up. Excellent. Now notice this is not particularly about Hanukkah, right? This is about Jewish history. Next story. In Babylon, God brought me to a holy abode. We're going through history now. We've arrived. We went back in our, time machine, our DeLorean, back to Egypt, and now we've moved forward into Israel. We enter Israel with Joshua and the kings and everything. Even though I found no rest, why? The oppressor came and exiled me. So there are many oppressors. Right at the time of the kings, ultimately, the Assyrians came in 721 and wiped out the northern kingdom, and then the Babylonians came in 586 and wiped out the southern kingdom, and the oppressor came and exiled me, right here from Galut, and I served strange gods. That's in Babylonian exile, or influenced by strange gods. The Yain Ra'al Masachti, and poisonous wine I drank. Kimat Avati, and scarcely had I gone into exile, scarcely had I gone. Ketz Bavel, it was the end of Babylon. Zubavel, the character who brought us back. By the way, it doesn't say Zubavel appeared. It just says Zubavel. Like that name should just be enough. Right? It's like the song Lahavdil, We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel. He just mentions a word, right? Red China, Doris Day, and you know what he's referring to. So if you know your cultural history for Billy Joel, Jewish, but Lahavdil anyway. But in here, you need to know your Jewish history. Ketz Bavel, the end of Babylon, Zubavel, the Ketz Shivim, just in 70 years, Noshati, I was saved. Oh, can people make sure they're on mute? Otherwise, you get this feedback. Okay, so again, do you want to have a go? Karen did great last time. Anyone have a go? What do we do and what do they do? It's a bit more subtle here. What happens to us? Well, in this one, we were treasured. We were panned with God, but the stones fell and we got saved. What happens to us over here? Anybody want to think what the imagery is over here? Like, what's this poisonous wine I drank? What do you think it's referring to? Feel free to type in the chat and have a go, right? Because I think Jewish learning should always be interactive. So you can have a go. I'm going to drink my cup again. If you can have a go and type in what you think is going on. What does it mean? I drank poisonous wine. Are the Babylonians famous for poisonous wine? Or what does that mean, right? And after 70 years, I was saved. So what happened in that time? What's it talking about here? Anybody want to have a go? No, quiet on the chat now, but feel free. Type in. You know what to do though, don't you, by the way? You just click on the bottom there and you find the chat button and you press on it and you just type to everybody or to me, and then we can see it. So we got one. Do we have any others? We have okay, Collins, we were assimilating. Yes. We persist when other empires ended. Karen, absolutely true as well. And as well, Colin, just saying about the assimilation, right? So maybe the wine isn't literally poisonous wine. It means we were infected, right? What we infected with, right? Zarum avadati, we serve strange gods. And serving strange gods ends up by drinking, by the way, wine, which is for gods, but it's poisonous because it poisons our relationship with God. It's a way of talking about assimilation. We got poisoned. Now, can you see why it's more pernicious than the previous one? When you pan for gold and stones, they're both there together, but they're not physically touching each other. And you can separate them out through a physical separation. Here, it's a bit harder now. The wine, the idolatry, the foreign influence has come inside us. Yenu al masachti, kimachi avati, and I'd nearly gone when I got saved. So it's as if those 70 years were the time it took for that wine to go through us to be influenced. And maybe if we stayed any longer, we would have died. But we survived. We got away with it. But they were poisoning us, and we got away. We also got away in Egypt, just about, right? We nearly got dragged down, but we got taken out of Egypt. We all know traditionally we're on the lowest level of spirituality, according to the Zohar, and the Jews made it out. So you'll notice the theme in each paragraph, there's them and us and different metaphor. And no, we kind of make it out in the last minute. It's a bit like James Bond, you know? He never defuses the bomb with 5 minutes to spare, right? Or gets out, 5 minutes later, everything explodes. It's always like the last second. So here, we nearly drowned. We nearly got assimilated, but we got saved. Let's move forward. We're now 516 BC, return of the from Babylonian Empire. Now, the next story, the poem story. Korot komat b'rosh bikesh, Agagi ben Hamdata. The Agagite, son of Hamdata, plotted to cut down the fir tree. So what's the Agagite and what's the fir tree? So you all know Agag was Haman. Haman was an Agagite. Haman Agagi. Again, he's not telling us you're supposed to know this stuff. The famous Agagite, son of Hamdata, right? Agagi ben Hamdata, that's what he's called in the Haggadah, ben Hamdata. And cut down the fir tree. So you have to part of the chat. I'm going to ask you, so think about this to write in your chat. What's the fir tree? But it was a snare for him. And his insolence was silenced. Roshimini Niseta, you raised up the Benjamin's head. Who's the Benjaminite talking about over here? And you raised the enemy's name. That's Haman's name. So that's maybe why he's not even mentioned, because it's erased, right? You don't mention the name. Many of his sons and his household were hung on the gallows. Okay, so what's them and what's us this time around? What do you think? What's them and what's us? And who's this Benjamite? Right, this fir. The hint is this fir tree. What do you think? Okay, the more you understand poetry and reading slowly into this text, the more you'll appreciate.
It's he's very clever and knowledgeable, but he's running it in a way that.
Do you want to mute so we can focus? I mean, do you want to mute people for me or?
To mute.
How do I get out?
There we go. Okay. Everything is here. No, I think rabbis need to learn as well, actually. We don't need to shout on Zoom. You can just talk. And if you whisper, people can hear you whispering. Right. So, anybody ever go? Want to suggest what this is referring to here? Right. The Haman plots to cut down the fir tree. I didn't think that it was an environmental story, the poem story, that they were cutting down our forests. Right. What's it referring to? Korot komat b'rosh bikesh. Right. Who's this Benjamite? You raised up the Benjamite's head, but erased the enemy's name. What's going on here? Anybody want to have a suggestion to write in the chat? There we go. A few people coming in now. Some good. Right. It's the gallows. Absolutely. So, right, we know that it was Mordechai who was meant to be hung on the gallows. Got another comment over here. Mordechai is the Benjamite, right? You raised the Benjamite's head, but erased the enemy's name. Okay. So cutting down the fir is interesting because the fir tree, you use trees to make gallows, which is interesting. And originally the gallows were made for Mordechai, remember? Because Mordechai wanted to have him killed, Haman wanted to have him killed. But then the gallows that were used ended up being used for Haman. And there's a real switch around, turn around, what the poem story is famous for. So again, you've got them and us. And it very much is now literally on the thing that was meant to destroy the Jewish people. Haman, right, the instrument to destroy the Jewish people, ended up being destroyed by the very thing he created to destroy us. So again, you've got a switch around of them and us. Interesting here. But what you might, I don't know if you've noticed here, what's missing. I'll introduce it now. I can mention it later, but there's another element, by the way, right? We talk about us. We talk about the Benjamin got saved, and we talk about that we got into exile and we've been poisoned. It never talks about what we actually did. It's about things being done to us. Can you see that? Right? We nearly sink like a stone, but God saves us. We nearly get poisoned because of this influence on us, but then we get saved. We don't do anything great. Here, even here, there's no mention of Esther saving us. It's just about it nearly got down, but we got saved. It's interesting how it's described in that way. The chat's adding, right? Yes, and Haman. We erase Haman's name in the Megillah. That's why he's not mentioned here as well. So again, you've got the them and us in the poem story, but I'm introducing another aspect of it as well to notice is we seem to be, and let's see if this keeps going, we seem to be passive. We seem to be passive in this story. The Jewish people are acted upon. And then you're right, it says, I serve strange gods. So yes, we are doing things, but we're not doing anything to save ourselves, right? So I found no rest. Yes, things happen to us, right? But we don't do anything in terms of the saving need. I say we're passive in terms of being saved. We might go wrong, you know, and in Egypt, we were kind of very assimilated, and Babylonians are assimilated. In the poem story, we were quite assimilated, the rabbis say, right? At the opening meal within the Megillah, there were some Jews who got over-involved. They didn't separate out. It was a problem. So yes, we were involved in that sense. We weren't passive in terms of our assimilation, but in terms of our being saved, we are. Right? It's if God saves us. We don't save ourselves, even though we know, you know, Moshe was involved here. No mention of Moshe, right? It mentions Zerubbabel coming back, but that's already afterwards. And again here with Haman. Now let's look at verse 5. Now this is the famous Greek one, and that's why people stop Maoz Tzur if they don't just do the first verse. They stop at the 5th verse because this one's about Hanukkah. But there is a 6th, by the way. It's important to know there's a 6th verse which we're going to get to. But let's look at the Hanukkah one. Yevanim nikbutzu alai. The Greeks, Yevanim, the Greeks gathered against me in the days of the Hasmoneans, so 2nd century BC. And they broke down my towers, it should be, and defiled all my oils, or chashmonim, another way of saying it, right? So who's me, by the way, here? Is me the Jewish people? Or maybe me now is Jerusalem. They broke my towers and defiled my oils, or maybe I'm the temple. Or Minoton kankanim nasenes la shoshanim, but with the last flask, notar kankanim, kankan is a flask, the leftover, the last flask. Now, Sines, a miracle was made, la shoshanim, for the roses. Right? It's a good year for the roses. Who are the roses, guys? You know, who are the roses? Shlomo, I'm going to tell a joke. I don't normally do this, but I'm going to have a go. You know this one? This old, I've got to see your face to see if you laugh at this. Right?
Laughing.
You know this one? It's the old couple on their 50th wedding anniversary, right, at the Kiddush, and someone says to you, "Oh, lovely anniversary, wonderful. You know, I heard you went on a lovely holiday," and the guy said, "Yes," and the guy says, "Well, where did you go?" So the guy's like, "It's a flower." So he goes, "What you mean? You went to Holland?" He goes, "No, it's a kind of red flower, rose." Rose? Yes, rose. That's right. Rose. Where do we go on holiday? Nothing. There you go. You're right, Shlomo. Nothing. Okay. So the rose. By the way, who are the roses, everybody? When it says a miracle was fought for the roses, and why does it say roses? Anybody know the image it's talking about here? Well, while you're typing in, I'll finish the line. B'nei Vina yimeshvana kavushi onanim. So the sages, B'nei Vina, the smart people, the wise people, 8 days they fixed for us a day of 8 days of singing of songs of praise, shir onanim, songs and praise. So who are the Shoshanim here, and what do they do to us here? So let's see what we can do. So Shoshanim, we have, Mim suggests it's Yudit in that story. It's one, but you're absolutely right. There's a famous Yudit story with Holy Fairness, although it's a debate whether it's a Greek story or another time, but it's plural. So it's not just her, right? It's plural. So what do we say? The Maccabim, all the Kohanim, right? Talking about the Jews. Why talking about them as roses? Because we were talked about, right, in Shir HaShirim, right, like a Shoshana ben Chachim, we were like the Jews are like a rose amongst the thorns. That's the image that's going on here. And again, why say the Jews when I can use a beautiful word that rhymes? Shoshanim and Unanim and Chashmonaim. I want a rhyming word for the Jewish people that's beautiful. We're like a rose surrounded by thorns. And again, we're defiled in a similar way with verse 3. Right? They defile all our oils. They broke down my towers. So in a similar way to assimilation getting towards us with the poisonous wine, here they're breaking down our walls. Those walls could be the walls of Jerusalem, the walls of the temple, or the walls of yourself, because we know that the Jews are very influenced by Hellenistic culture. Remember the Greek story, the Hanukkah story, takes place 165 BCE, whereas earlier in 330 or so BC, Alexander the Great had begun in 10 years, conquered the entire region. For over 100 years, Israel had been under foreign Greek domination, with a culture of Greek Hellenized culture spreading over the entire region, all the way to Egypt. Alexander became the pharaoh in Egypt. So they knocked down our walls. We spoke their language. We dressed like them. Some Jews didn't get circumcised. Instead of going to study, they'd go to the house of sport. There were idolatrous gods in all over the country. We know this, by the way, from archaeology. They broke down oils, and defiling our oils doesn't just mean the temple oils, but ourselves, our spirituality. Oil is a great symbol for purity. Pure oil. It got affected by foreign cultures. It's another example of assimilation. Exactly, and Karen's absolutely right. There's a theme of contamination and purification. Excellent. You're on fire tonight, Karen. Good metaphor, I thought. Okay. And we sing to God. So, thank God that last little bit of oil left a miracle amongst the roses. So you know what? That oil was just that number of purity, that last bit of purity that we survived. We nearly fully assimilated. But it was because the fundamentalists this time, right? The Chashmenu who stood up, who didn't allow themselves to be Hellenized, that we survived. But we came close. Remember the imagery of the James Bond, each verse? We nearly get assimilated. In the last minute, we grabbed a victory from the jaws of defeat. There was just enough oil, right? Esther just about saved us before we were too assimilated, right? We came back from the 70 exile just in time. Each time it's that just in time story. Now, it's not the last verse, by the way. The last verse is this. And it's even put in the new Saksida. And it's a great ending, because just like the first verse was a kind of setup of, I sing, restore the temple, I've been in exile for too long, and then we hear stories of exile. So the first verse is an introduction. In a way, the last verse is a summary. It does talk about a final one, Rome, but actually it's also a summary. Bear your holy arm, Tzur, right? God saved us in Egypt with a mighty arm. Right, and hasten, bring the time of salvation, bring us home. So this was clearly written after the Greek story, sometime in exile history, and we'll have to work out now. Nakom nikmat dam avdacha, avenge the blood of the wicked nation that's attacking us. By the way, if you look at the Hurt Siddur, he changed the Hebrew of this verse, because it might have been implied that living in exile, we were attacking the nation we were living in. That's how contemporary it was. Okay, you'll look it up. You'll see if you've got a Hurt Siddur, right, that big blue Siddur from like 30, 40 years ago, you'll see he changes the Hebrew in it. Anyway, look, this is the original though. Nakomnik matdam avdacha, avenge the blood of your servants, right, wicked nation. We're asking God to take vengeance, right, which Hirsch didn't think was a good idea, but it's there. Sorry, Hurts, not Hirsch, Hurts. Ki acha, and feel the pain here. Ki acha lanu hayeshua, because the length of our salvation has been too long. And there's no end to the wickedness. You can feel this guy is living through pain. Dechei admon, but sell salmon, right? Dechei admon, push the red one, admon, admoni, but sell salmon into the deathly shadows, a bit Harry Potter-esque. Hakim lanu ro'im shiva, and bring for us the 7 shepherds. End. Hakim lanu ro'im shiva. What is that talking about? And when was this written? What's going on? Why is that the ending? Who are the 7 shepherds? And who is this red one? So traditionally, as you know, red, who was Esav, which was by no coincidence last week's Sedra, Vayishlach, Edom was seen as connected to Esav and was seen to connect, even though it's not true kind of genealogically, in the rabbi's mind, the enemy of Edom became Rome. And if actually look at the last Rashi of last week's Sedra. It says, Vahi Romi. And this is talking about Rome. Because the end of last week's Sedra Vayishlach talks about that, when it talks about the descendants of Esav, there's a very shocking verse there. It says, and there were many kings in Edom. So there were 8 kings of Edom before there were kings of Israel. Malchei Yisrael, right? Which is like hundreds of years later. But the Torah of Vayishlach is talking about what's going to go on in the future. So it talks about a very futuristic view over there. And we always read the Sedra Vayishlach just before or during Hanukkah. So that's not a coincidence. So again, we now say that this last one, this red one, is Edom, which they saw as Rome. So it must have been written in some kind of, and also it was actually seen as also the church as well, in terms of attacking, in terms of the Crusades, as attacking the Jewish people. That's what this was seen as because, you know, Byzantium and the Rome adopted Christianity, it all became one. So again, I'm not being rude, I'm just saying in the mind of a medieval European Jew, Edom was Rome and Christianity in terms of the Pope, and well, in terms of definitely the Crusades and attacking Jews for their faith. And that's the last verse. So we would therefore guess that the writer of this was living through that time. And we'll see, but we have to understand what the 7 shepherds are. And you've noticed the imagery as well about it's us and them. So let me just summarize what Tzur is from. Here we go, this basic information. Ashkenazi hymn sung in synagogue, right? As you know, the Sephardim don't sing this. Originated in Germany, people think in the 13th century. Authors Mordechai, as I showed you the verses, right? Originally there were 6 verses, and the last one, as I said, the red one, Edom, talking about the Romans and the later oppressors. And some think it was actually referring to the German Emperor Frederick Barbarossa. And if you looked at the picture for the advert for this shir on your website, there's actually a very famous stone carving of Barbarossa, which is what I was showing you, right? It's an incredible statue. And why is he famous? He had a huge red beard, and he led the attempt of the Third Crusade to recapture Jerusalem from Saladin, the Turkish military genius, from the Crusades after almost 100 years of Christian rule. Right, so the Christians, the church, and the Muslims are fighting to control the Holy Land. But as the Jews from as the Christians from Europe or from England as well spread across Europe on the way to the Holy Land, you know, why go the long way to attack, you know, the infidels? Why not attack the Jews? They don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah either, and we got attacked, and therefore the Crusades were a terrible time for Jews, as you know. So on the way to Jerusalem, Jewish communities across Europe were persecuted. We mentioned that in the Kinnot on Tisha B'Av. Frederick was killed in battle while his fellow crusader, Richard the Lionheart, who was a redhead, maybe there's a hint about the Adom of Richard the Lionheart, arrived in the Holy Land by sea, you know. And again, in those days, you know, they didn't have newspapers. So, you know, you would have one particular characteristic that would characterize a famous king. And Barbarossa, well, if you look it up, was known for his red beard. So the poet is being playful. They're connecting Edom and Rome and Christianity and Barbarossa, this Christian, I mean, he's a king, but he's a Christian country leader all at the same time. And that's what the poet is referring to in that moment in history. By the way, King Richard was also unsuccessful in conquering and came back to England. And later on, 6 more verses were added to Tzur for other enemies through history, but that would make lighting candles a very long story, okay? And as I've mentioned, the themes of these editions is about more persecutions of Christians and Arabs through time. So you see, it's not just about Hanukkah. It's actually about Jewish history, written in the medieval period by a medieval Jew who told the story of Jewish people, of how they nearly got us, how we nearly assimilated. We were acted upon, and we assimilated because of ourselves, nearly right. We were involved in that. But then it was God that saved us. We did not save ourselves. God saved us, as it were. We're quite passive in that sense. And that's going to be important for my next point as well. So in that case, the question is, why do we sing this, particularly on Hanukkah? We could just as well sing it on Pesach, right? Or just as well sing it on Purim. It's just a verse, right? So why Hanukkah? And I need to answer that as well. Just looking at the chat now. The old singers doesn't have verse 6, you're right. Right, but Jakovitz put it back in the red one, absolutely. And then the Sachs kept it as well, absolutely. They put it back in. Right. Let's keep going as well. Now, the points I want to make. Oh, here's the picture of him. Here we go. Look at this. That's Barbarossa. Look at that red beard made of red stone. So that's a great picture for you to see. Okay, look at it. Right, Frederick, commonly known as Barbarossa. Here we go. Right, sleeping in the cave. If you ever want to visit, I can't pronounce that. Right, in the Thurigia's Crucifer House Mountain Range. Let's go and visit it. Or all the other places we're going to visit once we come out of lockdown. Anyway, it's an incredible picture of him, but that might be right. That might be the character of the Che Admon Betzel Salmon. It's a great image to have him. And look on his head, he's got a crown with a cross on it. Yes, he's a king, but he's a Christian of a Christian country. So that's the connection over there. Now, look at this. My analysis. We've done this. Right, each verse we've compared and contrasted. Right, the Deathly Shadows versus the 7 Shepherds. But who is the me here? There's no mention of our achievements. We're acted upon. We are like a vessel. I'll come back to that idea. Also the tune, Maoz, Tzur, Yeshuati. Where's that from? It's a popular tune borrowed from a folk song. This is also important for my theories, you'll see. Written in the major key, not the minor key. The shift from music in the minor to the major chord is typical of the style of German Protestant who revolted against Catholic Gregorian chants. Again, I'm not an expert on this. You have people on tonight who are, so correct me if this is wrong. I got this from Sefer Modaim. The folk song was used as a military marching song originally. It's not our tune. And then 1523 was the words of a Christian hymn by Martin Luther. The lyrics said, Nun freut euch lieben Christen gemein, right? Nun freut euch lieben Christen gemein. Now be joyous, you dear Christians all together, right? Later, the tune was adopted by Germans who took it to Venice. Their Catholic composer visited the synagogue, picked it up, and used it for Italian dance routines. Maybe we'll hear it on Strictly, right? What's going on here? Right? Miriam's asking about the 7 shepherds. We'll get to the 7 shepherds. Don't worry. By there hangs a tale. But now, so I'm gonna try and show you that the choice of singing this on Hanukkah, even though it doesn't fit necessarily with Hanukkah, the tune that we did and the theme of the song are all interrelated at the same idea. What is that? I will show you. Here we go. So again, very briefly, we'll do this in 10 minutes and then we'll take questions. So you have to know that historically the rabbis saw Jewish history in terms of 4 exiles: the Babylonian exile, the Persian Empire exile, the Greek exile, and then the Edom, the Rome exile, which when the rabbis wrote this in the Mishnah and the Talmud in the 2nd to 7th century, they saw that as the Roman exile, even though it mutated into Christianity. But we were in exile until 1948, when we got the state back. So we lived through 4 exiles. And during the time of the rabbis, when they thought of this, and then the writer of this song, they were in the 4th exile. We now have the state of Israel back. But these 4 exiles is the model for Jewish history. And all 4 are part of the gradual demise ever since the Second Temple period. And in each time we confront a new empire. Babylonians conquered the whole region. Persians did, the Greeks did, the Romans did. Okay, so we confront an entire civilization, and we have the process of exile and redemption: kicked out, come back, kicked out, come back. And each iteration had an effect on the Jewish people. Right, we took over Greek names. We're influenced by Christianity and different ideas, and so on.
Okay,
in a way, the Greek exile was the worst. You know why? We didn't leave. The weird thing about the Greek exile is, please can you make sure you're on mute? The weird thing about the Greek exile is weird because we didn't actually leave Israel. So why is it called an exile? If we didn't leave. For exile, you have to leave. That's what exile means. But no, the rabbis saw this as a spiritual exile. Even though we stayed in the land of Israel, the temple got defiled. Yep. People were getting involved in Greek culture. They were, going to Olympic Games. Please can you make sure I'm quiet, mute? They went to the Olympic Games instead of anything else. Make sure you're on mute, otherwise we'll mute you.
I think I.
Good, thank you. Great, thank you everybody. Thanks for that. Sorry, it's a new politeness that goes on. You know, I know when Rav Shlomo goes back to synagogue, he's gonna be very excited. He's gonna have a big sign saying mute, and in synagogue he can just hold it up, and then suddenly complete silence in synagogue. That'd be great if you can try it, Shlomo. I don't know if it'll work, but you might be able to try that in synagogue when you come back. But anyway, right, so this exile is the worst. It's the most pernicious because it's an internal exile, a spiritual exile that happens. Okay, and thank God for Maccabees, they saved us. But let's keep going. Now, here's the key issue. Remember, I called this class the politics of assimilation. What does assimilation mean? Who was really conquered? Are we assimilated or do we assimilate? Now, because we're Jews, we always think of the word assimilation as a bad thing. Right? It's when you get assimilated into a foreign culture. But that's actually a tertiary meaning of the word. The normal use of the word, right, is the incorporation of a new situation transformed to fit into an already organized scheme of action. Right? If I give a good share tonight, you will assimilate it into your knowledge. It'll become part of your knowledge, right? Or you get a new book, you assimilate it into your library. So normally you assimilate something. Only the other idea is when you are subordinated and you are assimilated. That's not actually the right word. What normally happens is this word, integration, the process whereby any minority group, especially a racial one, adapts itself to a majority society and is accorded equality rights and treatment. If such a process reaches the point of obliteration of minority culture, then you're assimilated. So do you integrate or do you assimilate? Integrate means that I find a way of living within British society and remaining a Jew. I don't assimilate, right? But if I get obliterated by that culture and I can't survive with that culture, then I'm assimilated. So that's the issue. The challenge of Jewish survival is integration, but we often got assimilated. But I want to look at this word assimilation, right? And I'm going to suggest something slightly daring, which is that you know what, maybe we nearly got assimilated by those cultures, but we did assimilate them. What do I mean? We survived in Jewish history. We took with us all those things, right? A lot of Greek thoughts we kept going. We know about it because of Maimonides. When he talked and analyzed about it, it was known and translated, but we included it within Judaism. Maimonides, the Golden Mean, is known about. When I was in university and a master's in education at UCL, and we did a course on virtue ethics, and we were taught the Golden Mean, right, of Nicomachean Ethics of Aristotle. And someone said, and the professor said, "Has anybody ever heard of this?" And I said, "Yes, I learned it in Hebrew from Maimonides when I was a teenager." And the whole class looked at me. Who's that weirdo? Right? But Maimonides had assimilated the best of Greek thought into Judaism. And in fact, we have assimilated many different ideas into our faith in our way of doing it. The rabbis have found similarities and brought the best of it, chucked away the things that aren't relevant, that are relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and brought them in. Maybe we've assimilated things around us. Or have we been assimilated by it? That's the challenge. It's so interesting that we're talking about this, a few days after Rabbi Sachs' Shloshim. Rabbi Sachs believed that if Jews go out into the world and teach them our values, that we won't get assimilated. He said that we're like ambassadors. Right? An ambassador doesn't assimilate because an ambassador's home is full of the culture of the country they're from. They have the flag up, they have the cultural identity. And the minute you step over the threshold into the house of the ambassador, you're not in the country that you're living there. You're now suddenly transported to their country. And Rabbi Sachs also believed, that when you go out in the world and teach your faith, people say to you, "What does Judaism believe?" And you go, "Tucker, what does Judaism believe?" And you go and ask your rabbi, and then suddenly you're learning. So in the need to share your values with others, you end up learning more about your own. So it's a challenge. How do we stay inside enough to keep our faith and our tradition? But how do we get involved in the world enough that we're not assimilated? That balance is a very difficult one. And that's, in a way, what's going on in Maoz Tzur. We get acted upon, right? And maybe we carry something with us, but we survive. Now, these 7 shepherds really relate to us. What are the 7 shepherds referring to? So I think they're referring to a verse in Micah, right? Micah is talking about the invasion of the Assyrians. Right? This, says the prophet Micah, and this is talking before the Assyrians invade, by the way, in the 7th century, 8th century. This is what will assure your safety should Assyria invade our land and trample your fortress. What? Hakim alav shivim ra'im. You've got to raise up the 7 shepherds. It's clear, because that's the phrase ra'im shiva. That's clearly what the rite of Maoz Tzur is referring to us, to raise up the 7 shepherds. That's what it's referring to. But what does he mean? What are the 7 shepherds? What does Rashi say? Shiva ra'im peshu shmotem b'sechet sukkah. Their names are mentioned in Tractate Sukkah of Talmud. You can see over here, we're going to mention it. But then look what Rashi says. Ve'eni yodem hechel lamdu. But I don't know where they get it from. Rashi's going, I don't know where the Talmud got these 7 from. Micha says the 7 shepherds, but who are they? He says, you want to know who they are? Look up in the Talmud, but I don't know where they come from. So the David, a more kind of literary, direct commentary says, Manhigim shal ha'am l'hoatam haderech. These 7 shepherds are manhigim, nahag, right? They're the drivers, they're leaders of the people, instruction, who guide them in the way. So a shepherd, right? Remember, Abraham was a shepherd, Moses was a shepherd. The shepherds are leaders who guide the Jewish people. So Micah was saying, raise up, 7 is normally the number of wholeness, raise up 7 leaders to save the Jewish people. That's what Micah is referring to. And that's what the Maoz Tzur is referring to. Where are our leaders, he's saying. We're still saying it today. Where are our leaders who are going to come? The 7 great leaders who will come up and save the Jewish people. But let's look at that Gemara, because we learned something interesting about the nature of the leaders. Look at this. And by the way, when you read it in this context, it is blindingly obvious what they're talking about, but I promise you not one commentator says this, but every one of you will work it out. Tell me what this is referring to. Who are the 7 shepherds? It's in Sukkah because it's talking about Jewish history. Who are the 7 shepherds? David be'emtza. King David's in the middle. Adam, Shet, Mutushelach. Adam, the first person. Seth, Shet, his son after, Methuselah, the great-great-grandson. This is all the first 10 generations. Yaminav, on the right of David. Avraham, Yaakov, and Moshe, Abraham, Jacob, and Moses, Bismillah on the left. So were these all so I know Abraham was a shepherd and Jacob and Moses, they were shepherds, that's true. David was a shepherd, yes, we know that as well. Why Adam, Shet, and Methuselah? Right? Well, what's it referring to? right? Remember, because Cain kills Abel, and then there's a third son, Shet. So it's his son, and then Mashiach is the great-great-great-grandson, 8th generation. So what's it referring to? And what's this middle and right and left thing? Please write in the chat. It's not just me. What image is the Talmud clearly describing? Anyone want to write in the chat? It's so blindingly obvious. And not one commentator that I've ever found, and I've looked at the back with the boys and Marsha and everything, says this. I'm sure there are, because it's so obvious. I can't believe no one said it. Right? It's a menorah. Right? It's obvious. It's a menorah. The 7 leaders. Why is David in the middle? Right? Well, we'll get to that. Let's look at the right and the left. What's the difference between the guys on the right and the guys on the left? What do Adam, his son, and his great-great-great-grandson, part of the first 10 generations of the people on the planet, have in common? And what do Abraham, Jacob, and Moses have in common that's different to each other? Anybody want to write? 3 on, man, it's not Hanukkah, but it's 3 on the right, 3 on the left. So it's a menorah, which was in the temple. We do Hanukkah because of 8 days. You all know that. But the image is really a menorah from the temple. But why? What do Abraham, Jacob, and Moses have in common on one hand, and Adam, Shet, and Shelach on the other hand have in common? Want to write in the chat? What's the difference? Come on. And it fits very well what we've been talking about. Think about integration, assimilation, and it might come out to you. And we go, come on, guys, don't let me down now. Got to get involved, right? Don't be an observant Jew, be an involved Jew. Chat, here we go. God spoke to them, that's true. God spoke to the ones on the left, that's true. Although God did speak to Adam, remember, in the garden. Adam, where are you? What have you been doing? Did you eat from that tree I told you not to eat? Okay, so another suggestion is humanity versus the Jews. Excellent. Adam, Shet, and Shelach weren't Jewish. I mean, Avram wasn't Jewish because Jacob's the Jews, but you know what I mean? He wasn't part of the covenant with God. They are universal, and this is all humankind. One is universal, and one side is universal, one side is particular. So why is David in the middle? That I'll tell you. Why is David? Are we meant to have a king of Israel? Did we wanted a king? Did God say it was a good idea to have a king? What, you want to be like the text says, you want to be like everybody else and have a king? Then you can have a king. Having a king is being like everybody else, because really there's only one king. But you want to be a nation like everybody else, it says in Shmuel? Okay, you can have a king. A king is the unification between the particular and the universal, the two sides coming together. That's why David is in the middle. By the way, I love that David's in the middle. You know why? David's in the middle. Look at his name. It's a palindrome. You read it forwards and backwards, David. And even better, David's name, and you'll really like this, is a Chanukiah. Look at David's name. You've got the stem of the Shamus in the middle, and you've got 4 on the right, Dalit is Gematria 4, and 4 on the left. David is the balance. He was a warrior, right? He fought battles like a proper nationalistic leader, like every other nation, lived in the universal world, conquered the land of Israel, was a leader on the world stage. On the other hand, the great singer to God, the great poet. In the Talmud, the great rabbi, who was spiritual. David was both. So what do we need for the 7 shepherds? What is the image that we need here to save the Jewish people? A balance. A balance. We need leaders who can balance the Jewish world and the universal world. Or rather, maybe we need both. We need leaders on both sides. We need Avrahams and Yaakovs and Moshes who are very learned and keep us on the straight and narrow. And we need Adam and Shem and Shelach of the Jewish people who can reach out and balance those two things. Okay, we need to balance the two. But I'll tell you a lovely thing which relates to the halacha of Hanukkah. What's the famous rule about the Hanukkah candles? They all have to be on a straight line. Right, the Mishnah Shulchan Aruch talks about they shouldn't be in a circle, they should be in a goal, they shouldn't be a goal, and they should be in a line, shura. It says that the Ramah says in the Shulchan Aruch. Why? So you can see that there's 8 different numbers, but I'm giving you now a metaphorical reason why. So there's balance. Look at me, I'm going to stand like this now with my hands, right? What kind of Chanukiah are you? Are you like this? Are you so involved in the Jewish world and you're learning that you're not conscious of the world around you? You try and build up walls for your children, your family, they're not involved in the culture outside? It's not going to work. They're going to get you. Or the other way is your Chanukiah God like this. You're so outside in the world and so assimilated, you've lost your Judaism. You need to have a kosher Chanukiah. You need to have a balance. You need to integrate. Remember the legs of the Chanukiah, I've got one over here, they join together. You must be rooted in that stem like David was to survive. Will you integrate or assimilate? It's the two sides of the Chanukiah, and that's what Tzur is about. It's about how we're acted upon. Things happen to us, but can we survive? So to summarize, because you've got to the end here, the key Chanukah metaphor, the purification and centrality of the oil, beyond military victory, the purity of the Jewish people, and that we plow our way through history, always immersed in the world, as you saw, immersed literally in the water in Egypt, or in the oil, or in the wine. And there's no escape from this. You can't escape Galut. Everything is affected. In your aim to not be part of the world, you're affected. Right? I remember on a Haredi website once, it's like there was an advert saying, internet banned by the Gedolim. Click here for more information. It was an amazing little thing on the website. Right? You can't escape reality. Galut is going to affect you. It's going to affect you. How are you going to react? Are you going to buckle down completely or let go completely? The Chanukiah says you've got to get balance, retaining religious and cultural independence. We've got to go beyond survival. This is the virtue of assimilation integration, the politics of this. How do we handle both? It is a dangerous game to play. And Hashem gave us this game through history. But what do we do with the Chanukiah? We light between, remember we talk about the light of Judaism and the darkness of the world outside? Where do we light the Chanukiah? In between the two, on the cusp. When do we light it? Twilight. The moment between light and dark, Ben Hashmashot, when it's not clear if we're in the light or in the dark. Between those two worlds, we Anglo-Jews live. Will we survive? Will we run out into the darkness and be assimilated? Will we run into the home and be pure but not involved in the world? Rabbi Sachs wanted us, as you know, to go in the world. He said, "You say the Jews and the Jews need the world, and the world needs the Jews." And that's the challenge of now. And that's the challenge, to go out and be part of the world, and yet retain as an ambassador our Jewish tradition. That's the balance of the Chanukiah. That's the balance of the seven shepherds, and that's why it ends in that way. The poet 500 years ago was shouting to us, Hakim lanu im shiva, raise to us the seven shepherds who can save us. That's the secret and the miracle of Chanukah and of Maoz. Thank you very much. Here endeth the lesson. Okay, so I'll first stop, and if there's any questions or comments, I'm very happy to assimilate them into my knowledge and claim that
they can come straight to you. They don't have to go through put up your hand.
Feel free to unmute if you want.
Unmute and go for it.
Yeah, feel free. Thank yous are also good. Available for bar mitzvahs as well and weddings. And I know it's a dangerous thing. I know it's a dangerous thing, Hanukkah. It really is. But I think Hanukkah really was the overlap between the two worlds, and that's why, you know, that spirit Hanukkah is that kind of internal exile within that we're challenged by. You know, do you have your Jewish name or your Greek name? You know, your given name, your Christian name. They should call it Christian name or your Jewish name. You know, my father's Israeli. He called me Raphael. It's the same thing, right? Ninja Turtle, Renaissance painter, you know, angel of God. It's all one. But you know, the challenge is to know your Hebrew names. You know, Benjamin Pearl, the famous school builder who built Yavneh School. Every time Benjamin would visit the school, he'd say to the kids, "What's your name?" And they go, "Simon." He goes, "No, it's Shimon." You go, ask them their Hebrew names, right? And after a few years of doing it, they go up and they go, "Hello, Mr. Pearl, I'm Shimon," and they would say their names. He taught them to be proud of your Hebrew name, of who you are. You know, that's what it's part of. So it's that balance of the two. Okay, so no comments. You're in silence. That's also okay, but feel free. Ben says, keep balance between the two worlds is active. That's not passive. Exactly, Ben. Now we have to be active to survive. Absolutely. The writer was saying that maybe we were too passive. We need to be active to gain that balance. But you know the greatest metaphor of the balance? You know, remember who said it? Right? Topol. You know, to be a Jew is like a fiddler on the roof. We're all fiddlers on the roof trying to, you know, eke out a living without breaking us a neck. And how do we keep our balance? You ask us, and I'll tell you. Tradition. Without our traditions, we would have been lost. Without our traditions, our life would be as shaky as a fiddler on the roof. So that image is us, right? As we balance our lives. So, you know, and don't step on the wrong slate. There we go. Laurie's asking or commenting, if Hanukkah is about integration and balance, why do we place so much emphasis on the military victory? We have to conquer the enemy. Not true, actually, Laurie. We don't concentrate on the military victory. If we did, the book of the Maccabees would have been canonized as part of the Bible, like the Megillah of Purim was, and it wasn't canonized. We don't. You know the story because we, as moderns, we learn it, right? We read the book of the Maccabees, but in Jewish, if you're strictly religious, you never learn the story of the Maccabees, right? There's a little bit, a couple of lines in the Gemara, one halacha in the Rambam. You concentrate on the spirituality of the oil. That's the saving. The spiritual life that we kept, the connection to Kadosh Baruch Hu, that's what we focus on. That's what we focus on. Wonderful to see you all. Right? Thank you nice to see you there, Claire, as well, all of you. So that's the idea. right? Now, again, I get these ideas from my teacher, Mattis Weinberg, wrote a whole book on Hanukkah, which is incredible about these issues. And it's really, this is just a scratch the edge of the surface, but there's a lot about Hanukkah and the connection between the Jews and the Greeks. So I don't know if you know this, it's halacha. You're only allowed to lane in 2 languages. Those who've been to the British Museum know this. Halacha, it's brought in the Mishnah, can only lane in Hebrew, obviously, and, no, not the Queen's English, in Greek. And Maimonides in the 12th century wrote halacha. The only reason we don't lane in Greek today is because the Greek we have is not the Greek that they had back then. It's a different Greek. By the way, it's the same Greek. We now know that because we've got the Septuagint, right? But
Look,
we won't do it. Pardon?
For most Jews, the Hebrew is Greek anyway.
Yeah.
Greek to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right? You know? I mean, you know why the Septuagint, why was the Greek, the Septuagint was done before the story of the Maccabees, right? It was about 30, 40 years earlier, because the largest Jewish community at the time was in Alexandria in Egypt, and they were assimilated and they could read Greek and they could not read Hebrew, right? So they helped support. They wanted the translation, yes, but Ptolemy, the Hellenistic leader, arranged for it to be done. But it was a lot of Jews supported it because they couldn't read in synagogue. Last week in Shul on Shabbos, I know you've got the lovely English next to you. Could you translate the whole Sedra without looking at the English? I'm going to be pushy now with you guys. Could you? If I gave you the Sedra, you could probably get quite a lot of it, but a lot you couldn't translate. Look at this. We are assimilated Jews, right? Until every Jew, I'm not talking about Rashi, I'm not talking about Talmud, I'm just talking about the Sedra, the Torah from God. If we can't translate word for word the Sedra, then we don't know our own book. What's happened to us? We become so assimilated. Yeah, the English is good, but we should cover it. We should need to learn Hebrew. Have you ever tried to appreciate Shakespeare in French? Would you dream of going to see a Shakespeare play in French and think you understand it? Right? You know, you've got to learn the language if you're, you know, and I go, we have to be, that's fundamental to culture, is our language.
You
right?
remember that story about,
pardon, Shlomo?
you remember the story about the translation of Shakespeare into Yiddish?
Yeah, go on.
On the front page, translated and improved.
Right, for Besson, right, translated and improved. Absolutely. Which is what, now I'm going to make a joke back, Shlomo. Certain very traditional Jewish commentaries do to the Torah, Shlomo. They translate and improve as well, right? Not like Aryeh Kaplan, who does a brilliant translation. We know, we love him, right? But the Hebrew, I believe a shul should not have one translation in its synagogue, it should have 5. So that you're looking at different ones. You go, what does it mean? Oh, mine says this, and then you know it's in translation. Because things get lost in translation. What do the Italians say? Traduttore, the translator is a traitor. Right? I'll tell you, remember there was a movie, Shlomo, it was called Lost in Translation. I don't know if you saw it. It's a wonderful movie by Sofia Coppola. It's a wonderful story about, I can't remember the comedian's name, but they're in Hong Kong, in Tokyo. This conversation of this older man and this younger woman. Nothing happens, but it's very interesting. The film's called Lost in Translation. Right? And my wife and I were living in Israel at the time, went to the movie, and the advert was in Hebrew. And the advert said in Hebrew, Ubadim Tokyo, right? Which means lost in Tokyo. And Jacqueline said, look, it's lost in translation. You know, they translated the title wrong. Was that a joke by the translator, or did they get it? But, you know, you lose. Of course, you can get a lot in English. And Rabbi Sachs's translation of the Siddur, and then when the Tanakh comes out, will be brilliant. But things are lost. So even if you don't know all the words, if you think there's a key word, look at the Hebrew, gradually build up the words of the Torah, to know the words of the Torah. You know, I can't do it all, I'll be honest. I think maybe 90, 95% now I can get and translate. I wish every word I could immediately know, but I don't.
Rafi, how far did Jonathan Sachs get with the Chumash?
I think he finished the translation of the Chumash. He actually finished it. That was as far as they got, with Jessica, his niece, helping him. But, you know,
his commentary?
Pardon? The commentary, no, it wasn't.
His commentary?
The commentary wasn't started. He wanted to do a whole new commentary. It wasn't done. It wasn't done. It's in the library of lost books. In the library of lost books. But you know,
I know that he had set aside this year to do it.
Yes, absolutely. I think he's working on it now, Shlomo. I think he's working on it now.
It'll be a letter from heaven.
Yeah. But I can't stress that Hebrew enough, guys, by the way, because, you know, and that's what the Jews in 2nd century Alexandria translated into Greek. And if you think they were assimilated, well, what about, are we any better? Are we just like them? We love translations, right? But let's get as many Hebrew words as we can in there, the key words. We can get a lot in translation, but the more Hebrew, even better. I'm being a pushy rabbi now. That's because your rabbi isn't so pushy, so I thought I'd do it because he's lovely.
You know, when you go to a proper yeshiva,
Right.
Yeshivas or traditional yeshiva, they won't allow you to use Art Scroll or Steinsaltz or whatever, because you learn to rely upon the English.
That's true. Sure. Look, I did. I knew every translation because for shortcuts when I came back. That's why I love Jewish College Library. Well, all translation, but I always tried to go back to the Hebrew and then read it again, and what word is that, and learn linear till eventually you learn the Hebrew. It's doable, you know. The Torah has got less verses than the entire Beatles back catalogue. Less than 6,000 verses in the Torah. I've looked it up. Beatles back is longer. And my friend Johnny Reinhold, professor in Bar-Ilan University, knows the entire Beatles back catalogue by heart, as many of you do. If I start singing, you can join in. Like the Torah is shorter. It's not War and Peace. It's mainly war. I mean, shorter than War and Peace. It's short. It's noble. Look, I'm from Yemenite. My father knows Torah by heart. I'm very honored. My father knows Yemenite Jew. He learned Tanakh by heart. That's what he can read. And I would sit on Shabbat table and open, because I'd test him and read a verse, and he'd just keep going because he was taught to sing it. So we've lost that tradition, but we can translate it. We can know the words of the Torah. Just think if 1 year you could read the Sedra and hear it and understand it without having to look at translation and enjoy the laning oral, Kriya, then it's inside you. Then it's like playing as a tune inside you. There's lots of Hebrew. You know Shema by heart. You know bits of Aleinu by heart. We can keep going. We learn more. I don't think you have to learn by heart just for rote, but because it becomes so much inside you. That's why I can probably sing 20, 30 pop songs by heart, word for word. How many of you could do Hamilton? I bet Hamilton is longer than the Torah, Shlomo. I mean, they pack a lot in those 3 hours. Right? And people can sing. My daughter can do the whole Hamilton, all those raps. And we don't know Torah. That's our rap.
You know the story of the kids who are learning their times table?
Right.
The teacher asked the first child, 2 times table, 2 twos are 2, 1's 2's 2, 2 twos are 4, 3 twos are 6 all the way through, 3 times table, absolutely fluent, 4 times table all the way fluent. Asked one kid, can you tell me the 6 times table? He says, la, 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 la. She says, but what about, well, to tell you the truth, teacher, I remember the tune, but I've forgotten the words.
Right. But even the tune sometimes is enough with Torah. But sing Matzah with gusto. It's a difficult one to understand the Hebrew of that, by the way. I'll give you the translation.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I will email afterwards if you want to have this handout. I will email it so you can have it. I'll email it to Shlomo, to Ellie and stuff, so they can send it out to you, so you can go through. But, look at the words. Look at the words. They are... No, the Torah is the word of God. We get to Hebrew words and feel them in our mouths. It's beautiful. My wife always says, what's the opening line of the Song of Songs? Listen in Hebrew. Shir Hashirim. Ashleh Lishlomo. Shir Hashirim. The Song of Songs of Solomon. It's not the same. It's like, when you do it in Hebrew, Jacqueline says it's like you're lying on a couch with grapes being poured into your mouth. You feel the luscious love of it. You've got to get inside it, and you lose it in translation. Right, the Song of Solomon. So,
Rafi,
enough. There we go.
Thank you. Wonderful as always. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Chanukah Sameach. Have an enlightening Chanukah.